Excellent. Well, good afternoon and welcome to our Museums for All informational webinar. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Ashley Jones, and on behalf of the Institute of Museum and Library Services, I'm pleased to welcome you to this webinar about one of our national initiatives, the Museums for All program. There are 3 speakers on our webinar today. In addition to myself, we will be hearing from Brendan Cartwright, who is the program manager at the Association for Children's Museums, and he's the coordinator for this special initiative. And for a participating museum perspective, we will also hear from Christian Zambrana, who is the Director of Visitor Services at the Cox Science Center and Aquarium. So to set the stage for more detailed information that we'll be sharing about the program, I'd first like to present some general introductory information. So Museums for All is a cooperative venture with the Association of Children's Museums with the goal of expanding access to the nation's museums by offering free or reduced admission for EBT or electronic benefit transfer cardholders. And over the past 8 years of this initiative, which started in 2014, IMLS has been working closely with ACM to recruit museums as program participants. And one of the strengths of this nationally branded program is name recognition, meaning that the member museums are united in an effort to provide increased access to those who might not otherwise be able to visit their sites. And another strength of the program is that the access provided is not limited to certain days or specific times. Museums for All participants are dedicated to providing access to everyone during their normal operating hours every day of the week. And we began the program with a pilot for the Children's Museum community, but since then, participation has been open to museums of all types across the country. And we're happy, of course, by how much the program has grown and flourished, but we know there's always room for more museums to participate. So I'm going to hand it over now actually to Brendan, who will present the initiative's guidelines to you.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. The goal of Museums for All is to be easy for all museums to adopt and potentially to adapt. We have a set of broad minimum guidelines that makes it an easy to use program, like ready to go out of the box. Those guidelines include offering a general admission rate of no more than $3 per person for up to 4 people when one individual displays a SNAP EBT card from any state. This is an easy way to identify a visitor who qualifies as having a financial need in a minimally intrusive way. Museums have the freedom to decide what their admission price will be, free, $1, $2, etc., and are only obligated to offer that price for a basic general admission. If there are add-on attractions in your museum, special exhibits, what have you, you're not obligated to include them in your Museums for All offering. The Museums for All rate would be offered during all normal operating hours. And I mentioned that museums can adapt their offerings as well. They can include WIC or Medicaid or other forms of identification that they would accept for the Museums for All admission rate. And they can include discounts on those special exhibits or events. And some museums choose to offer a discounted membership. You can basically build it however you'd like to suit your institution. And we've seen some massive success for this program so far. Over the 8 years that it's been in operation, there's over 1,000 museums have begun participating. This includes museums in all 50 states and also the District of Columbia and the US Virgin Islands. We had piloted the program in children's museums, but now every type of museum is represented. We got history museums, art museums, zoos, aquariums, which we'll be hearing from later today, multiple presidential libraries, and so on. So museums in cities, in rural areas, large museums, and small. This been a slide that we kept as we added each state, and now it's kind of a boring graphic, but it is. We do have total coverage of all the states, so we're very excited about that. And in case you're wondering how your particular region is doing, here's the breakdown. New England looks like it's lagging a little bit, but there are over 30 sites that are counted under the single banner of historic New England, so that narrows the gap a little bit. Many states are doing very well, but California, New York, Florida, and Pennsylvania have the most participants. Ohio and Texas have been growing very rapidly recently as well. And I mentioned that Museums for All was piloted in children's museums, which is one reason why we see of the large number of children's museums that participate. But we've seen quite a lot of enthusiasm in history museums and art museums as well. Some of these museums are free admission anyway, but they choose to participate to really drive home their commitment to extending the invitation to every member of their communities to come and visit. And as you can see by these charts, there's been a steady growth over time. With our latest round of reporting, we're at nearly 6 million visitors that have used the Museums for All program to visit a museum. The visitor numbers kind of took a little bit of a bump during the COVID shutdowns and the diminished capacities that museums were operating under, but people did still use the program during that time. And as you can see, the visitor numbers have rebounded quite well. A similar program to Museums for All is Blue Star Museums, and that gives free admission to military members and their families during the summertime. And there are around 2,000 museums that participate in that. And Museums for All, which runs year-round and is aimed at helping families with financial need, is at more than 50% of that total. So, we're thrilled with where we are, but we'd love to match and go past Blue Star Museums. So one phenomenon that we've been tracking are hub cities, or cities that have 3 or more museums that participate in Museums for All. And again, this was another slide that had a lot larger font earlier on, but we're up to 87, I believe, hub cities now. So they're the big cities that you might expect. New York, Houston, Chicago are on here. But there are also places like Greenville, South Carolina, Missoula, Montana, Springfield, Illinois, a lot of smaller cities as well. And in a hub city, museums can work together to really strengthen their Museums for All offerings. And they can also easily recruit other museums to join, or at least demonstrate the benefits of joining. And we've seen that in places like Richmond, San Antonio, Pueblo, and Grand Rapids. We'll talk a little bit more about hub cities later and how that works. But since you're here because you are interested in Museums for All, registering for Museums for All is very easy. There's a dedicated website, www.museumsforall.org, and there's a button to register there. The actual process should take probably less than 5 minutes, and it's free to do. We provide support materials like access to branded collateral, a group site, virtual hangouts, webinars like these, and more. We'll also send you a window cling to use at your site. And there's a searchable map on the website, and all of the participating museums are listed there. So some of the other resources that we provide include previous webinars that have been archived, infographics that you can use on social media, press release templates, examples of every state EBT card, because they are all different looking, and staff training recommendations. We periodically create and add more resources, so don't be shy in telling us what you'd like to have. And we've created some resources specifically for those hub cities that I mentioned as well, with some different sample press releases and template agendas and slide decks for holding meetings as a collective. So now you've seen some of the background of Museums for All and gotten an idea of who's participating and what kind of support is offered. And Ashley will let you know about why participating in this program can be valuable to your museum.
Thanks, Brendan. So now that we told you about the guidelines, we've told you who's participating in the program, and you're probably wondering, well, why should my museum join Museums for All? And there are so many reasons to participate, but most importantly, it affirms that museums are meant for all members of their community, and that the participating museums are committed to equitably expanding their community outreach. And what's great is that this effort typically fits easily within the museum's mission, vision, and inclusion plans. And also, Museums for All is yet another way to increase community access to your research, to your collections, programs, and exhibitions, as it reduces all barriers. Additionally, we make it as easy as possible for you by providing free, customizable collateral, such as press release templates and branding opportunities to make it even more successful. And another benefit we're beginning to understand, as Brendan was mentioning, is the power of participation among multiple museums in a single city. And forming these hubs is allowing those museums to market the program jointly, and thereby offering a menu of rich opportunities for the families in their cities to work together, to build partnerships with social service organizations and other community-based organizations, and also to have a louder and unified voice when they're approaching municipal leadership or local funders for support. So here on this slide, we've shared a couple of comments that we've received from participating museums that we think show the value of the program to visitors. They can be vulnerable community members who just want to experience something normal and fun. They may have taken a risk just coming to the museum, not knowing if they could afford to visit. And we also see that people can experience changes in their lives, either going on to food assistance due to hard luck, or getting off of it due to better fortune. But we think that they will always remember the museum was there for them when they needed it most. But way better than reading quotes, we have with us a real museum participant today. So now I would like to turn it over to Christian Zambrana of the Cox Science Center and Aquarium to talk about their experience with Museums for All.
Yes, thank you so much, Ashley, for the introduction, and good afternoon, everyone that's watching. Again, my name is Christian Zambrana with the Cox Science Center and Aquarium down in West Palm Beach, Florida. Today, I'm honored to be a part of this presentation to really share how the Museums for All program has influenced us over these last few years, and hopefully share some of the behind the scenes and some of the real world things that happens when we're actually going through this program. As we mentioned before, there is an option if you have questions. You can ask those questions in the chat feature. We'll have some time to answer hopefully some of those questions. And we really want to give you guys the true experience of what it takes to join this program, which spoiler alert, it's not difficult at all. And then some of the different things that you may want to think about in bringing up to your leadership or with discussing with your administrations on how to best go about implementing this program and how you can really make a huge impact on the community, and hopefully how that impact can come full circle as it did with us. So we'll start with our first slide, which I believe is just our intro slide, so we can go to the next one here. First, we'll just give a little bit of background as to who we are as the Cox Science Center. So we actually just recently rebranded our name back in November 15th of 2021. We were previously the South Florida Science Center, but we renamed ourselves to the Cox Science Center after getting a very large donation, which we'll touch on just a bit more. But we've actually been been in and around the South Florida community since the 1960s, opening in 1961 as the South Florida Science Museum, which was a very, very, very small space. We're very fortunate to still be around for such a long time, thanks in part to some of the really awesome things that we have, including our planetarium. But really kind of our bread and butter has always been what we provide for our community. South Florida has drastically changed over the last, 15, 20, 10, even 5 years have all gone through some very interesting iterations. And one of the key components to being a part of that growth is always being kind of the scientific beacon here in West Palm Beach, which is always a ton of fun. Our mission statement, of course, is to open every mind to science. So it's our goal to go out not just to the schools, not just to the families that visit us, but literally everyone in the community in order to make an impact to them, not just teach them science, but teach them how science can also impact their lives and how what they can do in their communities will also have an impact on us. So we've always prided ourselves on having that really deep community partnership. Because of that, so again, we are the leading science educational institution here in Palm Beach County. We work very closely with our school district. We serve over 300,000 students. We're actually projected to hit closer to 350,000 this year. So we're actually still increasing that. And we also are seeing over 100,000, closer to 200,000 again this year through field trips and educational outreach programs. And that doesn't even touch on just the general families and the general public that come through our doors each and every day. It's our goal to hopefully hit that 600,000 mark this year. We're getting very, very close to 600,000 individual people coming through our doors, which is pretty fantastic. We can go to the next slide. So now we'll talk about, again, why Museums for All was important. Why did we decide to implement this program? Well, it actually started here in 2019 is when we first found out about the Museums for All program. It's when I had taken over as the Director of Visitor Services, and I was looking for some new ways to kind of shake things up within our community. And one of the big things that I used to hear, especially moving into this increased role, is that at that time West Palm Beach was right on the brink of this huge economic boom. We actually hear the term down here, we are slowly becoming Wall Street South, which is great. It's bringing lots of businesses, lots of people, but with that is also lots of tourism, and tourism is a huge part here in South Florida specifically. But one thing that I began to notice when we started to lean more towards the tourism aspect is we started to lose a little bit of the community aspect that had served us for those previous 50 years. And even though we're seeing all of this increased revenue and increased attendance due specifically to tourism, we're starting to really see the negative impacts on the people that live here each and every day. And we really had to kind of take a look at why that might be happening. Well, it doesn't take too much research to figure out what was probably going on. We know that here in Palm Beach County, even though we're seeing some of these economic booms, we are also in the top 15% of the nation when it comes to wealth disparity. We've got some of the richest people in the country here, as well as some of the poorest communities in the country. And that's a huge problem, especially for an institution like us, because we are here to serve everyone. So we want to make sure it's equitable for everyone. We want to make sure everyone has that opportunity. It's also easy to see when you take a look at their school district, which is our #1 partner here in Palm Beach County. Nearly 70% of the schools in Palm Beach County are classified as Title I schools, which means 70 or more % of their student population is on the free or reduced lunch program. And those families are living below the poverty line. It only takes 70% to be considered Title I. Unfortunately, here in Palm Beach County, it's closer to 92%. So a very, very significant portion of our schools are serving communities that are already underserved. And that just really caused us to take a look at why we were doing this in the first place. And it brought us right back to our mission, opened every mind to science, and every is really the key word there. So if we look at the next slide, we can talk about what it actually took to kind of implement this Museums for All program. When I first brought this program up to our administration, we weren't quite in the successful position that we were now. We definitely were a very popular place for families to go, very popular school district, but not nearly as popular as we are now. And at that time, we weren't seeing donations come in and all of these other things that we were experiencing at the moment. So when I brought it up to the administration, they thought it was a great idea. It's a great program. It's a great cause. but we don't know how it's going to eat into our revenue. We don't know how it's going to affect our bottom line. You know, there was a lot of doubt that we had there. So they kind of had me put it on the shelf and told me to hold off. And then maybe sometime in the future we can revisit looking at the program. And again, that was in late 2019. Well, just about 6 months after that was March of 2020, which is the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. And that really changed everything for everyone here globally, especially here in the nonprofit world, talking about cultural organizations, science centers, zoos, art museums, history museums. We all felt that impact. We actually had to close our doors for 3 months from March through May. And then in late May, we were able to reopen our doors with reduced hours, reduced staffing, all of the policies I'm sure everyone's familiar with the masking and the sanitizing and everything else. We tried to do things primarily outside. And honestly, it was a very tough time for not just for all of us as individuals and families, but as a business. It was a scary prospect of, can we sustain this? Can we even do what we need to do to keep our doors open? But I think one of the best things that we did is, instead of leaning on our admissions and leaning on the education program, since we're not allowed to go into the schools, you know, how can we continue to still make an impact? Well, thankfully, we've got a great team here. One of the first things that we did, we actually started using all of our 3D printers and other resources, and we actually started making PPE equipment for our local firefighters, police officers, school officers that still had to, you know, work in the district building to figure out how remote learning is going to work. You know, all of those key resources and frontline workers that were really keeping the society and economy alive. You know, we wanted to do our part. So within that first month, we delivered over 2,500 individual pieces of PPE to all of those different organizations. And in doing that, we really got to go back to our roots and got a chance to talk with our communities and figure out, you know, what do they need in this time? You know, what can we do to help them? Just because the Science Center doors aren't open doesn't mean that we're not going to still be this pillar here in our environment. And with that, of course, the pandemic also brought lots of economic hardship. You know, people were losing their jobs. There was lots of layoffs. So even if we were able to open our doors and slowly start to build back our attendance numbers, you know, how do we make sure that we're doing that without, you know, cutting out some of these parents and families that couldn't even imagine going to a science center and spending money there, when they need to focus on if they're going to have food on the table, if they're going to have diapers for their children, or, you know, other key things in order to keep them alive. And that's what brought me back to the Museums for All program. There is something out there that we can do that will still allow these parents to get out of the house and break out of the cabin fever, but not have to worry about that financial barrier to entry. So the Museums for All program was just, it was waiting there for us. As soon as I brought it back up to our administration, it was an instant, yes, let's go ahead and do this. Let's see what we need to do. And in October of 2021, we were able to fully implement that program. Since then, we've seen just over 5,000 individuals. However, I would say about 3,000 of those have come within the last 6 months. So we're definitely seeing more of an increase closer to today than we were in 2021. And we're getting a very big amount of those people actually within our local neighborhoods. So the Cox Science Center is actually located within a city park inside of Dreher Park. And inside of this park, we also have our Dreher Park neighborhoods. And a lot of these neighborhoods are some of the poorest here on the outskirts of West Palm Beach. And it's crazy how, even though they are a literal 1-minute walk from the Science Center, how few of those people have ever even been to the Science Center, which is a shame. Imagine looking out your backyard, you see the Science Center and the big dinosaur we have up front, but those kids have never even had an opportunity to come over here, and cost was the number one barrier that they had. Since then, we're seeing a lot of those families. We get to know who those families are. We know who those kids are. A lot of them have rebounded and been able to get memberships, and they actually put us in connection with some really great people. One of the big success stories here at the Science Center is a lot of those people ended up, or a lot of the things that we were doing ended up getting to the correct people. And since then, they have asked to remain unnamed, but we have received 2 6-figure and 1 7-figure donation specifically mentioning the Museums for All program. And that has all gone towards our capital campaign for our expansion that's going to be starting later this year. So even though we really started this as a way to give back to the community, in a way it really came full circle, and next thing we know, we've got these wealthy individuals just down the street that want to invest in what the Science Center is doing, because they see that we not only care about how we do things, but we care about the community. We care about our impact. We care about making sure that everyone has that equal opportunity to do that. And they believe in our vision. They believe in us, and they are supporting us, not just financially, but supporting our mission to truly open every mind to science. And I think that is just fantastic. It's not something that we sought out to do, but it's the biggest impact that we can have on them, the biggest impact they can have on us, which is pretty crazy. And I think that's pretty much the story of the Science Center. I wish I could say that it was all a happy ending. It's very much not. We are still dealing with a lot of these same wealth disparity and inequality. We still have a lot of these same issues. There's a lot of politics involved that we tried not to get involved with, but unfortunately it does get down to our level. So we definitely still have our hurdles. But I also want to talk a little bit more about how we actually implemented the program from a Science Center standpoint, not just the happy ending that we have, but what research did we actually do in order to do that? So at first, again, we were a little bit hesitant, and even after we made the decision to go forward with the program, we didn't jump headfirst into it. We wanted to make sure we did our due diligence, and thankfully here throughout Florida, since there are so many other science centers and organizations that we already work closely with, we were able to reach out with our contacts at the Museum of Science and Industry in Tampa, the Orlando Science Center, the Frost Science Museum down in Miami. All of these other big science centers were already a part of the Museums for All program. So it really was fortunate that we were able to lean on their expertise and gain some of the experience that they had already gone through, kind of bypass some of the troubleshooting that they've already had. The Orlando Science Center is probably our closest partner and connection that we talked to regarding this program. And they gave us a little bit of a scare. When they first started the program, they actually got some pretty significant blowback from their community. Shockingly enough, there were just a lot of people that were upset. Hey, how come these people are getting this program? What about us? And while I don't agree with that mentality, it was a reality that they had to deal with, and something that we had to consider might happen when we implement this program. And so one of the warnings that they gave us was just making sure that when we do this, we really target those communities that we're looking for, and not try to make it this mass marketing thing. And that was their one big mistake when they started. That blowback lasted a very short period of time. It was maybe only the first month or two before people forgot, and they're very successful with the program and very involved in it, and they aren't experiencing any of that blowback anymore. But with their guidance, we were kind of able to bypass that and again, learn from them. So one of the biggest ways that we've actually marketed this program is going through our local library systems. We know that those libraries are already a hub for families that have financial hardships, because that's where they go to get their free books. That's where they go to, do science talks and book readings, and use the computers if they don't have computer or internet at home. So those libraries were already a huge place where people would go. So what we did is we decided we were going to print and deliver a bunch of free bookmarks. And the bookmarks just explains, what the Museums for All program was. We gave these out for free at all of our local libraries, and it just basically just gives them the information, what they need to do. The $3 admission at the Science Center you'll get in as long as you have your EBT card for up to 4 people, even though we're a little more lax with that. And we also had to understand what those clientele look like. Being in South Florida, we have a very large Hispanic community as well. So we knew that we needed to not only make these bookmarks in English, but on the back, we also had that same thing in Spanish. So not only are we trying to eliminate the financial barrier, but also the language barrier. It's just a big part of what we do. And we're hoping, because we also have a very large Creole population down here, we're hoping to make some bookmarks that we can also give out in Creole as well, to help hit that target market too. And again, so far, everything has been very successful. We, with our targeted marketing campaign, we really didn't have any negative blowback. It's quite the contrary. We had some very positive donations that came our way because of it. So hopefully you guys can take this to your administration, take these to your staff, get that communication started about how you can implement this program. it really is a net positive no matter which way you look at it. You know, it hasn't cost us anything financially. We're really tapping into a market that wasn't coming to the Science Center already. So if anything, even though it's only a $3 ticket at our Science Center, that's still even a little bit of revenue that we can gain. But the real benefit is for those families, giving them the opportunity to see the Science Center and to experience all the science that everyone has already had the opportunity to do. So I thank you guys for allowing me the platform to speak with you. You know, hopefully we get some questions coming through. I'd be happy to answer any and all questions you have. And thank you, Ashley and Brendan, for inviting me here today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Christian. You know, it's always nice to sort of hear, you know, what we say we think ought to happen when we hear that repeated back to us from people who are actually doing it. And you know, getting you know, millions of dollars in donation results may not be typical, but you know, it's we'll talk about how you know, it can definitely be a revenue driver for you. But for right now, we'll sort of come back to something else that Christian talked about how the museums you know, were affected by COVID-19. And yeah, even now, you know, a lot of people are back to normal, but there are some museums that are still operating at a bit of a reduced capacity because of it. But in something of a surprise, we still saw about 8 museums a month continue to register for Museums for All, even if they were closed at the time. And we increased the number of participating museums during the main period of the pandemic by over 400 museums. And it proves the continuing necessity of the program's mission. Unfortunately, it was the case that some of the museums that were participating in Museums for All had to close permanently. But I think there was, like, with one exception, every other museum kept their commitment to offering Museums for All rates to its visitors. And the one museum that did stop eventually started offering Museums for All rates again. So even during the hardship of the pandemic, you know, museums kept their commitment to this program because they really saw the value in it. And in fact, a couple compensated for their reduced capacities by offering their Museums for All rates to every visitor. And there were operational changes that were made during the pandemic. To ensure reduced capacities, most museums required guests to buy their tickets online or to at least pre-register. And many have kept this system or something like it in place. And it's a bit of a challenge to Museums for All visitors who previously had merely had to show their SNAP EBT cards at the admissions desk. So when building out these new admission systems, it's very important to keep in mind how your museum is still going to accommodate Museums for All visitors. Will you have an option at that ticket price on the menu? Will folks have to present their SNAP EBT card in person when they show up? Will you just direct Museums for All visitors to buy tickets in person? You know, there's not a right answer on this, but whatever your museum chooses, it should be explicit and easy to follow on your website so that folks know how to get their tickets. And when you're allotting the tickets by time, you know, do make sure that there are enough for Museums for All visitors. On average, about 3% of a museum's attendance is coming from Museums for All visitors. That does vary a little bit by type of museum, higher in children's museums, a little bit higher in science centers as well, lower in art museums and historic houses. One other thing that museums did during the pandemic while they were closed or unable to welcome as many guests as they'd like was to really increase their community outreach. Christian mentioned about how they 3D printed the PPE equipment for their local emergency service folks. And so while and whether that's offering virtual museum tours and activities or distributing STEM kits to schools. The museums embrace their roles as community pillars, which again, that was another term that I was happy to hear Christian use, and made active overtures toward their communities. So at its core, that's what Museums for All is all about. It's extending an active invitation to everyone and making sure they know that the museum is for them and that it wants them there. Museums recognize that access and inclusivity are important bedrock organizational values, and Museums for All is one way to help with DEAI efforts. An organization's commitment to inclusivity usually extends beyond just Museums for All. And in fact, Museums for All works best when it's part of a suite of offerings. So many museums offer reduced admission for seniors or children, or perhaps educators or military. And many will offer some sort of monthly free day, or even have free memberships that can be checked out of the library. And all of those are wonderful, and Museums for All supplements them rather than taking the place of any of them. And while the only requirements to participate in Museums for All is to accept SNAP EBT cards, several participants also accept WIC, and some accept Medicaid as well. I think the Madison Children's Museum has 21 different identifications that they'll accept for their $1 admission fee. So, you can definitely do more if you want. And about 10% of the participating museums also offer some sort of reduced membership program as well. They're taking the next step of getting people in the door on daily admissions and then turning them into members with more solid museum going habits. Some of them are also using the opportunity to catch visitors that Museums for All might be letting fall through the cracks. At the Omaha Children's Museum, they were expanding their reduced membership to include families that qualified for the reduced school lunch rather than just the free school lunch. So they were expanding that net. And there are families that might just exceed the threshold of qualifying for food assistance, but still could find visiting a museum to be cost prohibitive. These museums are stepping up and supplementing Museums for All in other ways to try and catch as many of those families as possible. It was a little bit like what Christian mentioned, that the Orlando Science Center was getting with, how come them but not me? So one part of joining Museums for All is broadening your visitor base. But another part is taking the time to work on assumptions and biases that exist within your own staff. So one participating museum that was located in a college town was surprised to see how many grad students that were there that were using Museums for All to visit. And they hadn't expected that many of the grad students to be on food assistance. And there are some wonderful resources around diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion on the AAM website, and the Cultural Competence Learning Institute, CCLI, is another fantastic way of museums looking to improve their own approaches to inclusivity. So, and the one complaint that does come up is why people on SNAP assistance deserve this admission discount, or rather, why can't someone not on food assistance get the same rate? So for our purposes, a cutoff had to exist somewhere, and we felt that a government issued card would work well and the least intrusively to demonstrate the need for some help in removing a financial barrier. But one of the reasons that we think Museums for All works best as part of a suite of options is so that those who don't have SNAP EBTs, some kind of appropriate price can be found.
Brendan, so I think it's over to me. So I'm going to talk with you a little bit about leveraging participation in the program. on. So sometimes museums or their boards can be wary of joining Museums for All, and they see that it calls for very deep admission discounts in some cases, and they worry it may be a hit to their budget. And we took a look to see if that would be the case. In 2018, we engaged Aurora Consulting to do an evaluation of Museums for All and the experiences that all the participating museums were having with the program. And the complete results of that evaluation are available on the IMLS website, as well as the Museums for All website. And we'd like to share with you some of the most pertinent findings. So only one of the museums that responded to the evaluation reported a decline in their revenue since implementing the program. Most reported no change in revenue, and over a third of the respondents said that they saw increases in ticket sales and attendance, and 25% saw increases in development revenue and membership and program sales. So Museums for All is a great opportunity to add new development streams, either soliciting funding that directly pays for the program or finding grants and sponsorships that can help. It's a great program that helps the entire community, and there are often foundations or banks or other local funders that want to be a part of it, and this is encouraged. But most importantly, we can see that there's no overall deficit to being a part of Museums for All, and oftentimes it can be a revenue generator. So one of the other things that we try to do with participants in Museums for All is to connect them with other museums in their city or area that also participate in the program. We've found that museums can do really great things with a collaborative effort to promote this program within their community. As Brendan mentioned earlier, we call those cities that have 3 or more participants hub cities. And in December 2018, we invited representatives from 7 of these cities, and that includes San Diego, Chicago, Akron, Missoula, Chattanooga, Worcester, and Grand Rapids. We invited them to a convening so we could determine how museums can work together to get the most out of Museums for All. And we found that several opportunities for cooperation exist, and not just between museums. They can use Museums for All as an entry point to establish or deepen connection with local food banks or transit authorities in ways that can overcome other barriers potential museum visitors face. These actions can build trust within the organizations of a community and also with the people. And it shows that the museums are serious about their commitment to having everyone visit. And the invitation that's being extended is real and genuine. And it communicates that the museums are willing to put the work in, on their end to make that happen. And the complete report from the Hub City Convening is available on the Museums for All website, which we'll share with you in just a moment. So if all of that we've shared sounds enticing to you, we want to remind you that it's very easy and it's free to register for Museums for All at the Museums for All website, which is www.museumsforall.org, and that's with the number 4. The resources and the reports that we mentioned during this presentation are available on that website. And if you visit the website, you'll also see there's a visitor section, which contains visitor FAQs and a map of the US with a directory of all the participating museums. So the visitors can easily find museums in their area or anywhere they happen to be traveling to. And we wanted to also provide you in closing with our contact information. We certainly hope that the information we've shared today has interested you in becoming part of the Museums for All participant family. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. We have the names and email addresses for Brendan and Christian and myself, and we're more than happy to answer any questions you have about the program. You can also contact the general mailbox, which is info@museumsforall.org. We also encourage you, we have an active Twitter account, so feel free to follow us on Twitter. The Twitter handle is @museumsforall. And that is our presentation. So we thank you all very much for allowing us the opportunity to share this information with you today.